Hi, I'm Patrick Giguere with Cosmic Alchemist Astrology, and welcome to this video. So thanks for tuning in. Thank you to everybody who watches this channel, who likes, subscribes, shares, and comments on the videos. I appreciate you very much. It's very encouraging. It helps the channel, and I thank you. If you're not yet a subscriber, I ask you to consider doing so. So let's get into the topic here. I have a good bit to cover. This is my November 2022 video. So it's a monthly video from November. It's the 5th of November, and I'm a little behind. So remember the 5th of November. That's a whole video in itself, but it's Guy Fawkes Day. Guy Fawkes, the masks from V for Vendetta, the mask with the the long thin mustache, and then the costume he wore with the cape and the wide brimmed hat. That was a depiction of Guy Fawkes. Guy Fawkes was basically a symbol of the Catholic rebellion in England in the early 1600s. So he basically tried to blow up King James I, who the King James Bible was dedicated to. King James was very oppressive. The King of England is also, or the Queen of England, is the head of the Church of England. There was no religious freedom. He was very oppressive, and he used to, throughout his life, he said that there's no difference between a Catholic, a demon, and a witch. So there was no religious freedom, and that's why, 1620s, the Pilgrims left England, started the colony in Plymouth, Massachusetts. Was not a great place to be if you weren't a member of the Church of England. And everywhere in the British Empire, you had to pay a tithe, 10% of your income, to the Church of England, whether you were a member or not. Doesn't matter if you were Jewish, Catholic, whatever. So, yeah, Guy Fawkes became this symbol of rebellion against tyranny. And that's a big thing here in the month of November 2022. Rebellion against tyranny is slowly gaining steam. What I would tell people, this needs to be a spiritual rebellion. This has to take place in your mind. Because really, the war right now it's a mental war. World War III started in January of 2020 with the Wuhan cooties crisis and all of these predetermined government reactions, the lockdowns and the wearing of the useless diapers on the face. And then the experimental needlecraft that people were urged and sometimes intimidated into getting. So a lot of good people who did not force their opinions on other people were pressured into receiving the needlecraft to keep their jobs. Other people were just frightened into it. They received it, but they respected the wishes of other people. So I'm not out after, I'm not calling out those people, because everybody has to make the best possible decisions that they can with the available information. But we do have to live with the consequences of our decisions. And, that's something coming up. But the people I do have a problem with are the ones who said we need to treat the people who don't get the needlecraft like domestic terrorists. We need to just shun them and cut them out of society. And these little turd kind of pieces of shit like Noam Chomsky, who said we just need to lock ourselves in our houses. Whether or not we can get food doesn't matter. We just need to lock ourselves away. So it's those people I have a problem with. And they're the ones who are asking for amnesty right now, because they realize they fucked up by being so bigoted towards people. And they're trying to gaslight the rest of us who did not receive the needlecraft, but then did not try to impose our opinions on other people. So they're pretty despicable people. They're a bunch of miserable middle class, American dreamers, and it's like, the American dream's a pit of despair, and people are miserable. That's why there's so many addictions running rampant in society. And this whole Wuhan cooties crisis basically gave these people, like these wallflowers, an opportunity to be a hero in their own minds and to be like radicals for a cause. So yeah, fuck the amnesty. I'm not forgiving those people and acting like nothing ever happened. I'll forgive them, but I'm going to keep my eyes on them. So anyway, November is going to be, it's going to be a hell of a month. Expect the unexpected. That's a big thing here. Expect the unexpected. This political contest on November the 8th, this midterm political contest, going to be a shit show to remember. People are going to be talking about Lectionier Odfrey. I think the Democratic Day Artipe, they're going to lose hardcore, and they're going to accuse the Republican Ray Artipe of Lectionier Odfrey. And, you know, both parties do this all the time, but, you know, when you look at the cities, especially the northeastern cities like Philadelphia and Baltimore, which are run almost exclusively by the Democratic Day Artipe, Lectionier Odfrey like takes place all the time, and they send people to jail for it. So yeah, they're going to be playing the blame game and playing the victims, and that's really their wheelhouse. That's where they thrive. They love to gain supporters. The people who tend to support them are people who they feel victimized, but they keep themselves stuck in a victim mentality. And the Democratic Day Artipe just feeds that victimhood, and they love it when people are miserable and they feel victimized. They don't help anyone lift themselves above that. But, you know, I don't like the Republican Ray Artipe either, because they suck too. Their primary approach to attracting supporters is to look for a different type of narcissist who kind of thinks it's cute to just go and take whatever you want and basically like intimidate people. So, you know, that shit sucks too. But that's going to be a prominent thing in this month. And I think, you know, one Mr. Biden, I think his health is going to give out. I went through that whole thing where he got his 5th needle craft the morning of the solar eclipse on October the 25th, which took place in his 12th house of hospitalization, isolation, and moksha, you know, liberation, death. Lunar eclipse on the 8th will be in the 6th house of health, disease, poisons, medicines, struggles. And then last year, 2021, there was a lunar eclipse the day before his birthday. So it's like, I think he's been living on borrowed time. I don't think he's going to make it through Thanksgiving. So yeah, those are going to be like some of the biggest shit shows of this month. The economy will have drama, you know, and blah, 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 blah. Big things are going to come out this month with this whole political contest gone sideways. You know, and I think the Republican Ray Artipe, they're probably going to win. But, you know, the corporate sponsors of the Democratic Day Artipe can definitely pull off some Lectionier Odfrey to what's the best word? To alter outcomes. So, you know, no matter what happens, no matter what happens, both sides of that whole dysfunctional marriage, and two-party politics is total dysfunctional marriage, where people just blame each other for everything. They don't take any responsibility for their own lives. They just blame the other person. You know, dysfunctional couples do this, and then they tear the family apart because they're always campaigning for support from their children. So, and what happens in those types of families, it really devalues the children when couples act this way. Because what they do, in the course of accusing each other of everything that ever went wrong in their lives, they're always blaming their in-laws for everything. And they're like, wow, my life was going to be amazing till I met you and your family. So when these types of dysfunctional couples, when they're always bagging on their in-laws, they're bagging on their children too, because children, they're one half one parent and one half the other parent. So they're one half one family and one half the other. So when you bag on their grandparents, you bag on your in-laws and talk about how fucked up they are, you're saying that about your children, whether you know that or not. So, you know, use your fucking heads if you conduct yourself in this way. So that's what politics is. So we learn this shit at home and we do it out in the world. So this whole political contest, it's going to highlight people's lack of selfhood and genuine identity. So it's going to be so apparent. You know, people are going to go crazy. Democratic Day Artie Pay and their political sponsors, they're going to get Black Lives Matter, you know, the slacktivists, Black Lives Matter, and then the Antifa slacktivists and the feminists, those slacktivists too. They're going to get them all wound up. They're going to be out there bitching and screaming. They're going to be burning businesses, you know, and because both the Democratic Day Artie Pay and the Republican Ray Artie Pay, they hate small business and they're trying to fucking plow it under. So the big publicly traded companies can just take the whole market. So they're going to send them out to do shit like that. And probably, you know, especially Black Lives Matter and Antifa, they'll be hitting people in the head with bricks and, you know, all that kind of shit. So, and what all these people have in common, and just people who they sit in front of the news and just bitch, and they make watching the news like basically their whole retirement, you know, or just even their lifestyle, even if they are still in working life. They have no sense of identity and they have no selfhood. You know, and this is like what religion and politics are all about. Religion and politics, they're prostheses, they're prosthetics for genuine identities and a genuine sense of self. They provide their followers, politics and religion provide their followers with righteous hatred and righteous prejudices. So they teach people how to feel like good people by hating the right people. So that kind of goes back to King James. All Catholics, you know, there's no difference between a Catholic, a demon, and a witch. That's a common one in the Protestant world, you know, just people hate themselves, so it's like to feel better. It's like, oh, well, we can hate Catholics and I'll feel better about myself for 5 minutes. You know, in the Catholic world, well, the Catholic world doesn't so much do that to Protestants because they kind of know how full of shit the church is. But in the Protestant world, they're often very starry-eyed about their churches, and they think, you know, they're wonderful. By and large, not everybody, but there's more naivete in the Protestant world than there is in the Catholic world, because these newfangled churches have no sense of history. So, yeah, with politics and religion, it's a prosthetic for a lack of identity and selfhood. And I always say, you know, selflessness is one of the dirtiest words in the world. So, in one sense, you know, there is a good side of selflessness where you don't exploit other people. You see that other people have feelings just like you do, and you don't think they're just resources for you to exploit. That's a healthy form of selflessness. But then there's a selflessness where you live in constant fear, and figures of authority can get you to do anything. They convince you you're going to save the world by hating people, beating people, killing people, shunning people, humiliating people. That type of selflessness is filthy. Or even a type of selflessness where you're just, whether people, you know, you're always saving the world at your own expense. Sometimes people aren't asking for help and you're almost like forcing the help on people. Or you allow them to ask way too much of you, so you save the world at your own expense. And then you get resentful when people don't give back. And it's even worse when people don't know how to develop that resentment for kind of being used. So yeah, selflessness is a dirty thing. Let me get back to my notes here. So yeah, the communists, the Nazis, the crusaders, the jihadists, people who ran the witch trials, all selfless people. That's the dark side of selflessness. You need to have a sense of self and your own identity outside of your politics, your religion, your family. You have to know who you are. And you have to devalue yourself to stop doing that. So you can't see yourself as just this pathetic, unworthy being who grovels, before the government or the experts or God. You have to value yourself. And another thing I want to get into, we're going to see a lot of righteousness here in November. Righteousness is a symptom of a lack of identity and selfhood. In the major world religions, we're talking Christianity, Islam, Judaism. Less Judaism, but definitely Christianity and Islam. They breed righteousness because they've taught people that you're not perfect enough for God to love you. God basically thinks you're like a piece of shit who's like filthy and unclean. And so this has given the people of the Islamic and Christian worlds total daddy issues. So they're looking to this daddy that lives on a cloud in the sky with a white beard. And they're like trying to get him to be less angry with them. So it's really sad. You need to have identity, you need to have selfhood. What happens to people who are devalued, especially in these political parties and these religions, is they don't have self-esteem, so ego takes its place. So it makes people narcissistic, whether they know it or not. Group identity without individual identity is a very dark thing. So this stuff's going to be highlighted in our world. Another big summary thing, look deeper into events. When I get into, what the full moon and lunar eclipse and the Mars retrograde and then the new moon, like what those events mean, there's going to be a lot in there. Look behind the appearances, see what's going on. Don't look at people's smiling faces and their prestige of their college degrees and their professional experience. Look at their character. Look what's behind the pretty tinsel. Don't get lost in the prettiness. In our society, we get lost in the prettiness. We've fallen into, just degeneration and gold digging. And we get lost in prettiness. Beware of new leaders promoting love and unity, because these people will not be all about love and unity. They'll be pulling your heartstrings in order to manipulate you. And a new leadership is coming. Now, big positive in all this. So our ancestors are protecting us. And in time, we're going to see this. We're going to see this all through the 2020s as the whole world order shifts. So I'm not just talking, when I say ancestor, I'm not just talking about your grandparents, your great-grandparents. I'm not talking about your biological line necessarily. In the older times, the elves, the humans who no longer reincarnate and go on to be perfected celestial beings, they were called the ancestors. So it's like the ancestors within our ethnic groups and our spiritual traditions. They were called the ancestors in the old times. They are protecting us. I think along with a lot of our biological ancestors too, who may still be working things out in the underworld, in between their incarnations. Now I say this because Samhain, Christianity appropriated Samhain. They turned it into Halloween, and they cut it down from a 2-week festival into just, one night. And they took away the guidance of the ancestors, and they gave us these like kind of these preposterous saints. So the saints were patron gods and goddesses who were given these fictitious stories about their lives. And they went and cooked up 3 miracles for all of them, so they met the threshold for sainthood. So we were cut off from our ancestors who existed before the Islamo-Christian book club. So the book that these clubs are centered around is, Bible or the Quran. So Samhain, these 2 weeks of Samhain is defined by, in tropical astrology, it's the period between the Scorpio new moon and the Taurus full moon. And then in sidereal, it's Libra new moon, Aries full moon. So it's either, late October into early November, or sometimes it's early November into, kind of mid and even later November. It depends how the moons fall. So it was a 2-week season for us to reflect and seek guidance from the ancestors. So that's a big deal because this year, the Samhain season perfectly coincides with the eclipse season because, again, eclipses are 2 weeks apart. Solar eclipse takes place on the day of the full moon. Lunar eclipse takes place on the day of the new moon. So it's a perfect lineup this year. It's a big-ass deal. So the ancestors, the immortals, our ancestors in the underworld, the gods even, because in all spiritual traditions, especially the celestial gods, were considered to be the ancestors of humanity. So they're working their asses off to help us and protect us. So, don't rely on your intellect and your ability to don't rely exclusively on your intellect, your ability to plot, plan, and calculate, and your stash of bullets and cans of beans and cans of spams to get you through what's coming. Realize that you live in a universe that loves you and wants to help you and protect you. And you are a very worthy being of all of this guidance and protection and support because you're conscious. That's all you need. Again, Christianity, Islam, Judaism teaches us, this whole line of bullshit where it's like, I am but unworthy, Lord. Oh, I don't deserve you. Yeah, you do. That's a bunch of nonsense. Narcissists manipulate you by getting you to devalue yourself. Jehovah's the biggest narcissist possibly there ever was. And religions are run by narcissists because narcissists gravitate to positions of power. So have some self-esteem. I highly recommend it. Okay. One of the big things, especially, we get through the Samhain season, which ran this year from solar eclipse, new moon on October the 25th to lunar eclipse full moon on November the 8th. Then after that, November the 23rd, with the next new moon, the Scorpio/Sagittarius, in tropical astrology, the lunar mansion that new moon takes place in is Hecate. So Hecate, she was like a Greek, she is a Greek, kind of a terrestrial goddess. So not one of the Titans, not one of the giants like the forces of nature, not one of the Olympians, not one of the celestials, but the terrestrials. And she is sort of someone who helps people navigate the underworld. She's a goddess who sheds light on dark things. She's one of the moon goddesses. And she helps us, she has night vision. She helps us to look into the dark side of our lives and the dark side of this world. One of the abilities she had was the ability to not only navigate the underworld, and she was actually a friend and an honored guest of Hades or Pluto, the god of the underworld, and Persephone, goddess. She was like an honored guest that had an open invitation. But then she had the ability to recruit the dead in the underworld to fight for her. So this is a big ass deal. This is like in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, in the Return of the King, where to save the land of Gondor and win the Battle of the Pelennor Fields in front of Minas Tirith, Aragorn goes into the mountain and recruits the army of the dead because he has the birthright to do that. The army of the dead basically owed his ancestor a favor. They owed him service. So Aragorn inherited the ability to recruit them as part of his birthright. So that's a big ass deal. And I say this month, look up Hecate, look up hell, because hell, Hel, the goddess of the underworld in Norse mythology, look them up and, have these goddesses on your mind, and even in your own, your own prayers, your own rituals, your own energy work and meditations. Call upon the power of these goddesses to bring forth the ancestors from the underworld to help us. And the underworld is also our unconscious minds. And the underworld is also your body. So you are surrounded at all times by your ancestors because they're in your DNA. So calling upon these ancestors in the underworld, we're calling upon our ancestral memories. We're calling upon the sense of identity and dignity we had before Christianity and Islam and Judaism came in, and even Buddhism came in and steamrolled our dignity and our self-esteem, and taught us to kiss the asses of religious and political leaders on the pedestals. Especially the political leaders that the religious leaders of these newfangled religions, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and Buddhism, put in place. So it's a big deal. Highly recommend this. And the other point here of protection, Jupiter is going to be working for us. Oh, by the way, these are not eyeglasses. I'm really into wearing blue light glasses because I've got LED lights pointed at me, and got like a lot of fluorescent lights at work. So I really love these things. LED lights don't do anything good for your nervous system and your liver. So anyway, yeah, Jupiter is going to be working really hard for us. So Jupiter, the Romans used to say, "Hail Jupiter." In the Norse world, in the Germanic world, Thor is Jupiter. So Jupiter is a priest, represents the priestly class, priests and priestesses, but also warriors. So in the old days, again, before the newfangled religions, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, many of the priests and priestesses were also warriors. And they usually just sort of did their own thing. They helped people with spiritual problems, and they facilitated, sacraments and ceremonies. And they did a lot of teaching. But then when political leaders started oppressing and exploiting the people, the priestly class came out to rebel and fight against the corrupt political leaders. And in those days, the political leaders and the warrior classes were very afraid of the priestly class and their warrior abilities because, they weren't just shooting guns and doing MMA and karate and jujitsu, the priestly class, but they understood the cycles of nature. They understood the elements of nature. They understood astrology. They had martial arts that called upon the power of the mind and the spirit. And from the point of view of the layman, they could do really spooky shit that really terrified people. So nobody wanted to piss these people off. So that's Jupiter, especially a Jupiter in retrograde. That's Thor throwing a hammer at some corrupt person's head. So, yeah. So Jupiter, protector of the earth and humanity. That is kind of defines Jupiter's role. Jupiter is, and then scientifically, Jupiter actually sucks in asteroids and comets that could threaten the Earth. So it actually physically protects the Earth. Now, in ancient times, Jupiter was seen as basically like a higher Earth with a higher order of humanity living on it. So in the 3D, Jupiter's a giant ball of gas, and, you know, our college boy, college girl scientists are like, wow, nothing could possibly live on Jupiter. Not in a 3D. But in a 5D, it's like a planet with all kinds of life forms on it. So when you look at the Bagua, the Chinese Bagua, or, you know, the Norse thunder wheel, with these 8 directions and these spokes in the 8 directions, and this maps out the 9 worlds of our reality. The world in the northeast is Asgard, home of the Aesir. Asgard, home of the Aesir, home of the celestial gods. And so the planet that corresponds to Asgard, and all of these 9 worlds have a corresponding planet. So the planet that corresponds to Asgard in the northeast is Jupiter. So that is literally the home of the celestial gods and the gods and goddesses who are, you know, 5th dimensional beings or higher. So the important thing with Jupiter here, Jupiter hasn't physically been this close to Earth since 1962, nor has Jupiter been in Pisces sidereally at the same time that Saturn has been in Capricorn sidereally. You know, if you look at it from tropical, Jupiter is in the high degrees of Pisces. In retrograde, wait, let me double check that. Yeah, it is still in retrograde. So, yeah, tropical, in retrograde, what is it? No, it's in the low degrees of Aries, excuse me, because we have 5 plus 24. No, it's about 29 Pisces tropically, and then Saturn is in Aquarius tropically. Point is, either system, Jupiter and Saturn haven't been in these signs at the same time since 1963, 1962 into 63. So back then you had the Cuban Missile Crisis. It looked like the world was going to be destroyed. But all of a sudden, you know, JFK and Khrushchev, neither one of them who wanted World War, both pissed off the deep state and didn't last much longer in power. JFK was assassinated by the deep state, and Khrushchev was basically outmaneuvered politically and discredited. But, you know, JFK had challenged Khrushchev to a peace race where they would start dismantling their nuclear arsenals and weapons. And the military-industrial complex, who controls the CIA and the Pentagon and, you know, the U.S. government, they were fucking livid, and the banks were livid because they lend money to the government to build weapons. And they were also lending money. Wall Street was giving the Soviet Union the money they needed to run their government and their military. So yeah, they pissed off a lot of people. But they did defuse the Cuban Missile Crisis and keep a disastrous war from happening. So back then, the scientists who controlled the doomsday clock, I think they had the world at like 5 minutes to midnight. So it meant like we were pretty close to some nuclear standoff. Well, today in 2022, we're like 2 or 3 minutes from midnight. They say it's even more serious. With this whole Ukraine war, basically, the U.S. broke its promises telling Russia back in 1995 that they wouldn't expand NATO eastward. And they kept doing that. They broke the promise. Now they're trying to bring Ukraine into NATO and into the European Union. So the U.S. and the West, you know, the governments and, you know, much of the population, a bunch of dishonest degenerates and, you know, with no honor. And they broke the promises, but then they're making themselves look like the victims and Russia look like the bad guys. This situation will also diffuse. Jupiter's going to do its thing. So, yeah, we do have a lot of protection. Make some room for it. Again, don't exclusively rely on your intellect and its ability to plan and micromanage and calculate, and on your, stashes of guns and ammo and pork and beans. Preparedness is important, but you're not alone in this universe. So that's about it in summary. Thanks for tuning in. It was a long one, but it's a big month. I'm going to get into some nitty-gritties here. So, nitty-gritties, again, the 4 big things going on. Jupiter, like I mentioned. And then Mars retrograde, and then, the full moon and lunar eclipse on November 8th, and then the new moon on November the 23rd. So the other thing I wanted to say about Jupiter here that we have in common to the early 60s is that we have this curse of the presidents every 20 years that coincides with the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction that happens every 20 years. So this is the generational cleanout. That conjunction is a generational cleanout. So Jupiter is expansion, optimism. Saturn is realism and limitation. So both are necessary for manifestation, because if you're all limitation, then you never move forward. You can't get anything done. You can't do anything new. If you're all optimism and expansiveness, you're scatterbrained and you can't complete a task. So you need both. Now, in the ancient world, societies, except for one exception, which I'm going to talk about, societies did not choose leaders in a year of a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, because it's the generational cleanout. So basically, a leader selected in that year will not last. That leader will be cleaned out by life in the universe very quickly. So they would wait. But the one time they would, from what I've gathered, the one time that they would choose leaders in this year were when leaders were meant to be disposable. They're meant to be sacrificed. When you look into Greek mythology, they will call these leaders year kings. So there's a really, really cool novel, I think it's from the 1950s, written by Mary Renault. It was a modern adaptation of the story of Theseus, who was a Greek mythological hero. And this book was called The King Must Die. So The King Must Die, it's the first in a series. It tells the story of Theseus. And Theseus happened to travel to, I can't remember the Greek city-state, but it was ruled by a matriarchy. It was ruled by women. And basically these matriarchs said, oh, congratulations, you're the new year king. You're going to fight the old king. Whoever loses, we're going to sacrifice. So, and this is, people don't like to admit this because, again, we love to be on the supposed moral high ground of being victims. So before there was a malignant patriarchy in the world, there was an equally malignant matriarchy that was destructive and oppressive. So in this, and it's not just Greek mythology, it's not just Mary Renault's book, but this is in the archaeological record, that there were malignant matriarchies that were pretty commonplace in the world for a long time. And they would sacrifice kings and warriors, or warrior kings, as it were, or priests even. So this whole thing, this whole matriarchy, patriarchy thing, it's been swinging back and forth for all of human history. And I think human history is millions of years old. So this is ridiculousness, just like two-party politics that's been swinging back and forth in this pendulum effect for just years and years and years. So it's like women are human too, you know. They're fucked up in a different way than men, but no less fucked up. And that's a big thing, you know, in this kind of hippy dippy new age spiritual community, you know, and you have like these castrated males who are also echoing this idea. And they're like, you know, we just need to let women just run everything. And, you know, everything, the world would be just so much better and beautiful. And it's like, there will be no wars. And it's like, yeah, you won't have wars. You'll just have like poisonings and assassinations like all over the place. Like war will drop off and then assassination will go up like 1,000,000%. Because women have a less direct way of confrontation, of going about confronting people and doing things. It's more catty, it's less direct, it's more passive aggressive. So yeah, this whole back and forth thing with male domination, female domination, that's gone back and forth, supported by mythology, history, and the archaeological record, you know, it has to stop. So yeah, these Jupiter-Saturn conjunction years, they would select these year kings who they would later sacrifice in one way or another, whether it was in single combat or whether it was in you know, a ritual where they tie the guy down and like drain his blood and pull his heart out. One way or the other, they would do this. And I think that's why, you know, the patriarchy came to dominate, because people were just, they got fed up with that. And they were like, well, let's try patriarchy. And I was like, oh no, that sucks too. So we got to find some fucking balance here. So anyway, with these year kings, you have the curse of the presidents every 20 years. So in the 0 years, like 2020, 2000, 1980, 1960, 1940, 1920, 1900, 1880, 1860, 1840, 1820. For this duration of U.S. history, for the most part, presidents elected in those 0 years, every 20 years, they will most likely die in office, whether in that term they're elected in or in a following one. Like FDR he was elected in 32, 36 in 1940, and he died in 1944. So, you know, and this is like JFK. What was the other one? Was it Harding or Coolidge who was elected in 1920? I think it was Harding. Warren G. Harding, McKinley elected in 1900, Garfield elected in 1880, Lincoln elected 1860, Harrison elected 1840. So, yeah, there's a precedent for this. Ronald Reagan survived assassination. George Bush Jr. survived assassination attempt. So Joe Biden elected 2020. I think it's back. He was elected in very feeble health with cognitive decline, you know, Alzheimer's, dementia. And he was given, again, he acquired his 5th needle craft on the morning of an eclipse in his 12th house. Bad news. So yeah, a good chance he doesn't make it past Thanksgiving, but you know, anything can happen. We'll see. I could be completely wrong. You know, I have to say that every time I do this. I could be completely wrong, but it just doesn't look good when you go into the astrology. So, but with these year kings, JFK was one of these year kings, elected in 1960, inaugurated in 61. You know, he made it less than 3 years. So we're going to deal with this curse of the president's year king phenomenon, in my opinion. So yeah, and that's a whole can of worms with the year kings and the sacrifice kings, and you know, when you talk about like Illuminati and all that stuff, I think men and women are working, males and females are working together in that. You know, you've got a boys club, but then I think The girls' club is much more hidden. And an interesting thing is that in secret societies and military organizations, there's hardly a male symbol. Um, Even in the national capital, Washington, D.C., full of female symbols. You know, the obelisk of the Washington Monument is like the one male one. But then it's sitting in a vagina. It's placed in a vagina, which is the Vesica Pisces that it sits in. So, you know, Capitol Dome is a breast. You know, the stuff's just everywhere. So yeah, I think that there's also a girls' club running in the Illuminati. And maybe running the sacrifices on these year kings. All right, next, Mars retrograde. So Mars retrograde in tropical takes place wholly in Gemini, and then sidereal goes from Gemini, 1 degree of Gemini, back into Taurus, goes to 14 Taurus, it goes past Aldebaran and past it again. So, you know, at this point, I'm wanting to look at things from both a tropical and a sidereal point of view. Tropical gives you the personality, gives you the appearance of things. Sidereal is like the soul and the essence. So, yeah, I think when you look at this Mars retrograde tropically, it's Gemini, it's the media, it's trade, it's travel. It's like disrupting all those things, causing all kinds of hate and discontent spread by the media. Media like winding people up, getting people angry. Sidereal, where it starts 1 degree of Gemini, everything goes way back into Taurus, all the way back to 14 degrees. You're getting the wealth and resources and the material environment, and business leaders, and even money involved. So, to me, it's like just the Mars retrograde is going to bring up anger in the media about what business leadership and financial leadership have been doing, how they've been making money, things like how they've made money by using the media, which they sponsor, especially the drug dealers, to exaggerate the severity of the Wuhan cooties crisis so that people will get the needle craft, which we've been paying for in the back end because, you know, up till now they've been like, oh, it's free, just go get it. And it's like, well, no, you pay for it on the back end through your taxes at an inflated price. Cost what? I don't know how many billion for those injections. A lot of money. So a lot of these misdeeds are going to come to light. For America, this is, you know, America is a Sagittarius ascendant in both systems. Tropical, it's all in the 7th house, so it's going to deal with, basically, we're going to become aware of enemies who've been attacking our country. In the sidereal, especially true because it's going from the 7th back to the 6th. And both of them deal with enemies, but then the 6th deals with conflicts and battles and struggles. So, and the 6th house also deals with health. And Mars, you know, Mars is warrior energy. It's weapons, blades, needles. There you go. But yeah, all kinds of drama and anger in the media. So the Democratic Day Artipe through the media is, you know, with this whole clown show, shit show political contest on November 8th, they're going to be, you know, they're already saying, our democracy will end if our opponents take control of the Congress. And it's like, no. It's like democracy just means rule of the mob. You know, until FDR came in, we used to talk about our republic. His administration got the whole our democracy thing going on. And when you study political philosophy, democracy is a stage of societal degradation. It's in the 5 stages of democracy. It's one up from the bottom, which is just total tyranny. So Yeah, democracy is the rule of the mob. It's a bunch of misinformed, ill-educated people being manipulated with sentimentality and emotional hysteria. So yeah, they're going to be doing plenty of that. They'll accuse the Democratic Day Artie will accuse the Republican Ray Artie of Lectionnier Odd Fray, which is the Democratic Day Artie's preferred move. But, you know, narcissists accuse people of the things they do. And they both do it. But, you know, one thing that's going to be highlighted here, the whole blame game world, especially, which has existed up to now, which is all the baby boom has ever known, and really all Gen X has ever known, and the generations who came before us, before them, it's all they've ever known is the world of the blame game. So we learn this in religion, Christianity, Islam, especially, where it's like, oh, don't like the world, don't like something going on in your life, I'll just blame Satan. You know, Satan did it all. It's all Satan's fault. Don't take any responsibility. Don't look at your own hypocrisy. Don't look at your own bullshit. Don't call other people out on your bullshit. You know, and that's where, you know, I live in North Carolina these days, and they have the whole, it's a cultural thing. And, you know, Northerners get a reputation for being loudmouthed, for being rude. A lot of Northerners are that way, but we're very direct. We'll just come out and tell you you're full of shit. The Southern culture is more, people say, oh, bless your heart. That basically means I'm not confrontational enough, and I don't have the fortitude to tell you you're full of shit. So I'm going to say something that sounds nice. It's actually an insult. So, you know, that's the blame game world is like, it's when people, you know, and you know, blame game world is in the whole world. Don't get me wrong. But the blame game world comes from like, you can't hold yourself accountable. You can't hold people accountable in the moment for things that hurt you, insult you, or piss you off. Usually because it's like, you know, they're friends or they're family members, and you're afraid that if you hold them accountable, they're not going to like you or love you, and they're going to like reject and abandon you. So because people won't hold themselves and those who are dear to them accountable, they look for other people to blame for what they don't like about their world and their life. So this is all going to get highlighted. Gotta go. All right, we're moving on. November 8th, full moon and lunar eclipse. I think this is a bigger deal than the solar eclipse, which is on October 25th. Last day of Samhain, last day of this feast that honors the ancestors, where the veils between worlds are the thinnest, where we can communicate with and seek guidance from the ancestors in the celestial realms who have graduated from reincarnation. And we can communicate with and seek the guidance of ancestors in the underworld who are still in the reincarnation cycle working things out. So this one's going to be a big deal here. So we have, in the tropical, this takes place 13 degrees Taurus, lunar mansion of Pasiphae, sidereal 21 Aries, lunar mansion of Hades, aka Pluto. So it's a big lunar eclipse because, and let me get to my notes here, the moon, the full moon, is conjunct with Rahu. So full moon is 2 degrees away from Rahu, the dragon's head, the north node of the moon, and 1 degree away from a retrograde Uranus. So Rahu is the trickster, the master of desires. Rahu brings new things in. Ketu or south node eclipses cut things away. So in the solar eclipse on the 25th of October, we had old values, old ideas, old relationships. It was time to cut those loose. Now, a lunar eclipse with Rahu and Aries, we need to bring in new ways, in sidereal, new ways of thinking, because Aries is the head. New ways of thinking, new action, because Aries is action and initiative. And then tropical, it being in Taurus, new ways of living, new ways of procuring resources, new ways of using resources, new ways to relate to resources and money. So Rahu conjunct the moon. So the dragon's head is consuming the moon and bringing these new things in. Rahu, though, Rahu is a master of delusions. Can be deceptive, not maliciously deceptive, but deceptive in order to catalyze evolution. So it gives us kind of it leads us into our own ego traps where we see people and situations inaccurately. We project our own narcissism onto them. We see them for what they are not. And it takes us a while to learn that. So Rahu expands whatever it's near. So it's going to expand the emotionality of the moon. So it's going to be a very emotionally touchy day. And then Uranus being only 1 degree from the moon, moving towards it in retrograde. Uranus is disruption. Uranus overturns status quos. Uranus is also the keeper and the guard of the gate to paradise beyond the sphere of Saturn. Saturn is the outermost visible planet. It rules the 3D physical world. So Uranus is beyond it, and it's the gate to the higher realms, the paradise. So Uranus shakes things up. It shakes the earth. It destroys the old stagnant, complacent status quos. It makes people's powdered wigs fall off and makes them, clutch their pearls. Uranus is also rebellion. But the thing about Uranus, it uses rebellion to get change going, but in itself, it doesn't symbolize lasting, meaningful change. Uranus is just the catalyst. Pluto, representing the soul's journey, also represents the transformation and the lasting, meaningful change. So Uranus is a Kickstarter, but what can happen? People can get stuck in and spend entire lives in the kickstart of rebellion. So this is like the hippies. They thought they were big heroes because they protested and they smoked a shitload of weed and dropped acid and ate mushrooms and, had sex with a shitload of people and had, smelly, hairy armpits. It's like, well, they really didn't do anything. They really didn't get anything done. That whole movement was created by the Nazis who helped start Central Intelligence anyway. They're the ones who promoted LSD and all that stuff. The whole hippie movement was a pressure release valve to get the youth off the trail of the deep state.
You will find that it is you who are mistaken about a great many things. Come, boy. See for yourself. From here, you will witness the final destruction of the Alliance and the end of your insignificant rebellion.
So, you don't stick it to the man by doing drugs regularly for 50 years. You actually play into the man's hands. So, yeah, you have to get past the initial rebellious stage of Uranus. So it's like just eating different, hanging out with weird people, adopting eccentric habits and behaviors. The outward appearance of rebellion is not enough. You have to transform. You have to embrace Pluto. So, yeah, so Rahu, North Node, Dragon's Head is going to expand that rebelliousness and that disruption of Uranus. So it's going to be rebellious, disruptive, super emotional, and hysterical. So what's going to be disrupted? So when you look at the tropical, it's going to be resources, money, all that stuff, financial world disrupted. And then when you look at it from a sidereal standpoint, it's going to be people's thinking and leadership disrupted. People are going to be out of their minds. They're going to be mentally deranged. There's this guy in Ireland whose videos I like, Thomas Sheridan. He talks about the Renfield effect. So Renfield was the lunatic in the Bram Stoker's Dracula story. He was locked up in an asylum, which is basically across the road in London from the land that Dracula bought. Dracula basically bought an old ruined monastery. Before his ship even arrived in England, Renfield is like screaming out the window, that Dracula's coming. So a lot of people just in the population, they're total Renfields. They already know something's coming, and especially older people who watch the news all day, they're total Renfields. They know something is coming and is happening, but they don't know what, but they're hysterical about it. And even a lot of young people, they're just losing their shit in day-to-day life. So yeah, people are going to be mentally deranged, especially on November the 8th, on the midterm political contest day, and then just moving forward through the rest of the year. And then the derangement's going to persist for several years, in my opinion. But for a lot of people, it's once the crazier events start happening, they're going to breathe a sigh of relief. I know I am. When the pandemic came, I was like, oh, finally. Because, I've been told about that. I've been told to avoid the needle crafts, So it was a relief to me. So yeah, through all this, and the other thing too, with being hyper emotional and with being disruptive, with Moon, Uranus, Rahu, Taurus can be spoiled and self-indulgent and even kind of snobby, and condescending. Aries can be aggressive and impulsive. So beware of charismatic leaders who have a dark underbelly, who have a dark underside that they're not showing you. Because, right now it's the season for, oh, we just need hope and diversity and unity. Or, oh, we just need more patriotism and more Jesus and a bigger military. And it's all going to be wonderful. And more national security. So watch out for people's plastic smiles. Watch out for people who tell you everything you want to hear. People you don't like cannot manipulate you. It's the people you like and love and even trust who are capable of manipulating you. Bear this in mind. So yeah, our misleaders, the misleaders who administer the world for the vested interest, they're going to be extra deceptive, extra disruptive, going to be rebellious, self-indulgent, spoiled brats. Like I said, resources, and the material environment will be disrupted. And people will be mentally disturbed worldwide. And this leadership change is taking place all over the place. And again, this day, November the 8th, this lunar eclipse could very well send Mr. Biden to the hospital. He may come back, he may not. But, change of leadership is a big thing that's going on right now. So America's not going to be exempt from that. So yeah. And then, sidereally, where the lunar eclipse full moon takes place, it's Hades. It's Pluto. It's the god of the underworld. It's all about deep transformation. It's all about it's all about the realities and the truths and the emotions and the fears that you don't want to face. But the ruler of the underworld makes you do that. It doesn't torture you. It's actually, gods and goddesses of the underworld are very compassionate, but they're like, you're not getting out of here until you dump your baggage and deal with your issues. And it's going to take as long as it takes. There's no buying your way out. There's no charming your way out. And then tropical, Pasiphae, this lunar mansion where it takes place. It's all about, Pasiphae was a child of Helios, the god who drove the chariot of the sun. So Pasiphae was very lunar in that Pasiphae reflected the light of the Father. So with everything going on, be aware that these political leaders and even these like financiers like Bill Gates, Klaus Schwab, Elon Musk, be aware that they are just reflectors. They are just lunar reflectors. And even, all this fucking nonsense like bloodlines of the Illuminati, Fritz Springmeier and all these, David Icke's, where it's like, oh, the world is run by these 13 bloodlines. Here are their names. You don't know the people's names who are really in charge. All you know is the middle management people. If you know somebody's name, they're just middle management. The people who actually run everything are much more intelligent than that. So, the people, the movers and shakers that you know about in the world, they're not solar. They're not where the orders and the energy of these events are coming from. They're just the lunar reflectors who are just delivering the message and doing what they're told. So, interesting tie-in with this lunar mansion. And then finally, we get to November the 23rd, new moon, in the sidereal at 7 degrees of Scorpio, tropical 1 degree of Sagittarius. So, the lunar mansions for the sidereal, it's Urania. The Vedic name is Anuradha, which is actually the most stable part of Scorpio. So it's part of Scorpio. It's all about loyalty, stability, trust, helping people, honoring, the bonds of family, friendship, that kind of stuff. And then tropically, that 1 degree of Sagittarius, that's in Hecate, who I mentioned. And it's pretty interesting. So Urania, Urania, the sidereal lunar mansion where this takes place. Urania is like the higher, it's a title of the planet or the goddess Venus. But Urania is like a higher vibration of Venus. So just plain old Venus deals a lot with sensuality, and it deals with love, but it's more like the carnal, kind of lustful aspect of love, which, it's totally awesome, and it's something you need. But Urania is the higher divine love. So it doesn't have the physicality attached to it. The physicality can be a door to it, though. The sexuality can be a door to that divine love. But the energy of Urania, it's like that unconditional divine love. And then, so I would say with this, by November the 23rd, we're most likely going to be in the aftermath of either Mr. Biden's resignation or his passing. And I don't wish this upon him, but his health was in shambles when he was installed onto the Iron Throne, and it hasn't gotten any better. So there's likely, his replacement's likely going to be there. She's going to be, flying the BLM flags and the rainbow flags and, talking diversity, inclusion, equality. She's going to be talking all that, but it's going to be all shit talk because she's not about any of that. She put hundreds of African Americans in jail as a prosecutor in Oakland, California for petty marijuana possession. She's a bullshit artist. Politicians are prostitutes. She's a big prostitute. So don't believe that bullshit. And, just don't. There will be, in the wake of that, there will be calls to obedience where it's like, just do what you're told because this is a great tragedy and we need to have love and unity. And it's like, no. It's like, we don't need to be doing anything violent, but we need to have both eyes open. We need to be scrutinizing those people and not following them blindly. So yeah, watch out for these false peacemakers. Now, that's with the Urania. That's sort of like the soul of it. Now, when you get to Hecate, again, a lunar goddess, a goddess of illumination. A terrestrial goddess, older than the Olympians, not as old as the Titans. She was symbolized holding these two torches. So it's like twin towers, two pillars in the Masonic Lodge. You know, very much like these two torches. So Hecate, again, you know, some accounts, she escorted Persephone into the underworld when she, you know, agreed to marry Pluto. In other accounts, Pluto abducted Persephone, and Hecate helped her mother Demeter search for her with her torches. But yeah, Hecate had this ability to come and go from the underworld, navigate the underworld, see in the dark of the underworld. She could see into dark, mysterious things in life, which would include conspiracies and, you know, hidden power and all that stuff too. So this energy of this goddess will be working hard for us with this new moon. And new moons I look at as conceptions. She's actually going to plant the seeds for us to have better night vision. Not everybody will seize that opportunity, but we're going to have the ability to perceive things more deeply and more clearly. And I think this is another day where new information can come to light to support this whole Mars retrograde and support these eclipses. So, yeah, pretty interesting. I've made some notes about Hecate. Goddess of magic, goddess of witchcraft, mystery, and of the night. See, she can see in the dark. She looks to bring light to dark places and dark situations. So she's not sinister. She's trying to shed light on things. She's kind of like Prometheus, kind of like, you know, Lucifer, Loki, a light bearer. What else? Goddess of crossroads. So crossroads are symbolic of past, present, future. Crossroads are symbolic of having decisions to make. Crossroads are symbolic of like places where the spirit world meets our physical world. So all of those things are relevant right now. Being able to look clearly at past, present, future, being able to make informed, clear decisions, and being able to, again, interact with the spirit world. Because by the 23rd, we're about what? It's 14 plus, yeah, about 2 weeks. Yeah, well, actually 2 weeks out of Samhain. So, you know, this is like the last hurrah to have this, you know, this where the veil is thin, where we can communicate with the ancestors. And again, Hecate could get the dead in the underworld to fight for her. So think on that and take that into your knowing. I think the ancestors, the ones in the underworld and the ones, you know, in the heavenly realms, you know, the higher vibrational realms, they will be working to help us and to help just sort of create kind of anomalies in the world that get our attention and help secret information come to light. So this is going to be really interesting. So yeah, this is a time to see through the darkness. And, you know, and Hecate, the lunar mansion, is ruled by Ketu, dragon's tail, south node of the moon. Ketu clears things away. Ketu destroys illusions. So this is a time where illusions can be destroyed so we can see clearly and see into the darkness. Hecate deals with sudden and extreme reversals and setbacks, which are all about balancing. So it's like, yeah, it's probably going to be some market drama, prices of things still going up, but it's a reflection of the world rebalancing, because mom and dad's world cannot go on any further because their retirement accounts, when they do well, it's because there's, you know, there are wars going on in the third world, proxy wars like Ukraine, like the war in Syria, like the war in Libya, Yemen. There are, you know, wars like Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam going on. That keeps people's retirement accounts and investments paying out. So all that stuff's going to get disrupted because there are rebalancings going on. Now, Hecate has a shadow side, which can be arrogance, ego, and anger due to expecting a material reward from services rendered and efforts given. So Hecate just, in the mythology, just helped people and didn't ask for anything in return. What this speaks to, for me, with this anger over rewards not given, this is about how traitors and collaborators always end up getting executed. So throughout history, whenever like one country wants to conquer the other one, in a country being invaded, there are always traitors and collaborators who they feel that they've been slighted or maligned or done a disservice by the rulers of the country or even the people of the country. So a lot of the time, the traitors and collaborators are minority groups. Just like in Soviet Russia, where most of the early communist radicals and activists and party members were actually Tartars, Jews, Georgians, Armenians, like the minority groups in the Russian Empire, Azerbaijanis. So, yeah, a lot of time people have legitimate motivations for wanting to basically see the regime in their country fail. But inevitably, these traitors and collaborators are executed because the conquerors coming in are like, well, we don't trust you either because you sold out your own government, your own country. Like, what are you going to do to us? And that's the thing about radicals, ideological radicals, especially when you look at all the communist socialist regimes in the last 100+ years. They always execute the radicals. The leaders execute the radicals and extremists who help them come to power because those radicals turn out to be the biggest malcontents because the leaders never intend to keep their promises. It's like this in any election. So politicians are also collaborators. So the deep state, the finance people who sponsor the politicians and the government, they see the politicians as traitors. And then the people of the real deep state, who we don't even know who the hell they are, above all of them, they see all of these levels of management under them as traitors. I think the highest levels are planning to sell out the middle and lower management as we speak. So Joe Biden's a good example. He hasn't been allowed to retire from politics because he's done a bunch of shady deals. And he's been blackmailed, and he's done a bunch of dirty shit in order to become as wealthy as he is and to get as much power and influence as he's had for almost 50 years. So he has been, I think that fifth needle craft on the eclipse day will prove to be kind of an execution. Will do his health in. I don't wish this upon him, but I think that's what's going to happen. And then he's been executed in a way that he's being used. Like elder abuse has been perpetrated against him. He's old and sick and demented, and he's not allowed to retire from politics. So he's had to pay back his figurative deal with the devil. So, it's like you can't retire because we gave you everything. So you better do what we tell you. That's what's going on with him. It's going to happen to Kamala Harris. She's going to be like Daenerys Targaryen. She's not going to sit on the Iron Throne long. She, as a traitor and collaborator, she'll be physically safe, but it's like her career and her character and her public image will be executed. And it's already started. The left biased media is already tearing her up in the media, making fun of her. So, yeah, collaborators and traitors are always shot. And politicians, religious leaders, and even like the types of business leaders who push the needlecraft on people and do things like that and promote these lockdowns and, you know, take $2,500 out of your bank account via PayPal if you say something contrary to the mainstream narrative. They're traitors and collaborators, and their careers and public images will be eventually executed. So I'm going to leave it at that. This is a long one. That's all I got. And I highly encourage you, get a reading from me, especially going into, you know, the rest of this decade. It's a good roadmap. You can see your hidden opportunities, hidden pitfalls, all that stuff. Helps you to get in touch with yourself and know yourself more deeply. So that's that. Thanks for tuning in. Have a nice one.